And the medical field, especially the NHS, they are the other end of the trade, as in they're the ones who essentially exist based on government budgets.
What he mentioned with regards to wage slavery, and I remember someone in the interview asked him, okay, but you can just leave your job if you wanted to, so how's it slavery? But then his response was, okay, but you can't leave your job.
NHS as a system is a social system whereby everyone pays their part and it gets spread across the board. A lot of doctors are going private now.
A doctor, because of the understaffing or not being valued because of their pay, they might not go the extra mile that they would do for a specific patient.
It's like a boat that's sinking. And you're just trying to get the duct tape to try and patch these holes. But every time you patch a hole, another hole appears. All these strikes and all this stuff you want to do, it has zero consequence to you. Essentially, by playing that game, you are indirectly harming everyone else. Even if it's a small fraction, we are.
Hello and welcome to the brand new episode of the StriveMed podcast. So excited for this episode, honestly. We've got a tremendous guest here. Just to reintroduce ourselves, myself, Dr. Anam.
Dr. Farah.
And I'm Muawiyah Tucker.
What an episode we have lined up for you today. I'm so excited to get into the nitty-gritty of it. Just a quick disclaimer, anyone who wants support with their medical applications, www.strivemed.co.uk. We have GCSE, A-level tutoring, all delivered by senior medics, and help with your university applications as well. So this is actually a special episode for us. It's the first episode where we have a non-medic as a guest. Muawiyah Tucker is a highly esteemed guest. He's studied Islamic sciences in Islamic University of Medina. Following this, then he specialized in economics as well, and with a special interest in cryptocurrency. He has his own channel as well, Crypto Hash Review. If you're not subscribed to Crypto Hash Review, then I don't know where you've been this last few years, living under a rock.
Alhamdulillah.
It's so nice to have you, Ustad.
Thanks for having me.
Just wanted to kind of introduce our relationship together. We've lived through one bull market together.
MashaAllah.
You've
earned the stripe.
Yeah. And we did the course together, the Living the Crypto Lifestyle. I was a member of the course, being part of the Telegram group the whole time.
MashaAllah.
I will admit I was a bit of a rebellious student at some time because kind of went off the straight path, dabbled a bit in Ethereum, Matic, things like that, ideologically. So I did change a little bit halfway, but I'm back on the path. And I just wanted to bring this book here just to kind of re-earn my brownie points with you, re-earn my XP. I'm back on the path.
MashaAllah, we're on the Bitcoin standard,
Yeah.
Inam's been a propagator of the Bitcoin. He's even brought me in at times.
Yeah,
I've dabbled a bit in Bitcoin as well.
Alhamdulillah.
So mashallah, he's really propagating it.
But the main thing is like the understanding of the macroeconomic picture and just kind of like taking the curtain over, like kind of off your eyes, because a lot of the time, you know, we've grown up in this environment and we have a certain perspective of what money is. Like, there's so many different terms of money and different words you can use to describe money. I'm sure you have money, you have stacks, you have bills, racks, dollar, guap, like all of these different kind of ways to describe money. But what is actually money? And we wanted to kind of make this specific to the macro environment of the economics which doctors are facing in the current climate. So I just wanted to kind of ask you if you have any kind of ideas why we brought you in as the first kind of non-medic to discuss the economics of doctors. Is this something you've heard in the media recently at all by any chance?
I mean, considering that I'm generally known to do with Bitcoin specifically and whatnot, and I've invited here, I'm assuming there's a connection between the two. And I think it's interesting that with Bitcoin, I mean, well, it could have been anything, but it happened to be Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, when you go down a rabbit hole of trying to understand money, as opposed to just accepting what you have and using it, you find that it actually touches almost everything. And no doubt, I mean, it touches everything because this is what we all work for, this is what we pay our bills in, this is what we essentially, it's the tool used for communication. It's a tool used for exchange of value and exchange of work and labor. And it's a tool used for that's basically for exchange of labor. So it will touch everything. It does. It is. I mean, even for example, like international trade, global politics, all of it comes into play at some level. Maybe not directly, but there is some element. So, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it's something to do that.
Definitely. I mean, that's exactly, you know, what the way we learned with you is the means of transacting, the IOU essentially.
Yeah.
And the most robust form of money that we have today.
Yeah.
With regards to diving down the rabbit hole, this is something you described. Once you do dive down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin, you actually uncover the reality of inflation, kind of taxation, how government expenditure is done, what actually is fiat currency, the conventional currency as we know it. And so with regards to kind of explaining the picture, we just wanted to kind of present you a few statistics with regards to what's actually happening in the current climate for doctors. And it is heavily related to kind of inflation and how doctors around the world, particularly within this country, they feel that they're not being paid their worth. They feel that their altruistic nature or their kind of sound intentions to do good towards society is taken advantage of, and therefore they're not being compensated sufficiently for their output, for their labor. Okay.
You know, it's interesting because the certain phrases you used, sorry to interrupt, certain phrases you used, which it needs to be explained. So there's this kind of like this meme in the Bitcoin space where there's parallels drawn between Bitcoin and the Matrix.
Yeah.
Even the phrase used, down a rabbit hole, which is actually from what's it called? What's the book called again? Alice in Wonderland.
Right.
But the idea is that we've all been raised and exist in a system. And the system has just all been around us, engulfing us, and we haven't been able to see beyond the system, much like Neo. But there came a point whereby he was able to see behind the system and realize what no one saw.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing, like I said, about when it comes to money. We all grew up knowing that money is just a piece of paper or these coins. We've all grown up to know that when we go to university, you get older, you get to university, you get a degree, you get a profession, and you get a house, and you get married, and you have kids. The path of life was always kind of clear to us, and therefore we never got to, or never thought to ask or scratch the surface beyond all of that. And you just touched upon the issue of inflation and doctors not realizing, not receiving what they feel their due is. The remuneration is not being adequate, and that's literally a byproduct of a current system, which again most people are unaware of. So, for example, since 1971, for example, and we can speculate as to whether the series of events of unpegging the dollar from gold was the catalyst, or was it a symptom of something greater? Whatever the situation is, the point and fact of the matter is, on pretty much all metrics, you find a divergence between the cost of things, cost of living, and remuneration, as in how much it costs or how much your wages are. So wages have technically gone up at a certain rate, but the cost of everything else has gradually grown over time.
Yeah.
And that's especially exaggerated in things like real estate and, more importantly, education and medicine.
Right.
Medicine, if you look at the statistics of the cost of medical treatment, not just, I don't know about the wages of the doctors, but I'm assuming it's a similar thing, but cost of medical treatment has gone exponentially higher compared to what people can afford. Just as a ballpark idea, in the 60s, if you worked and grafted a normal menial job, 4 years on the grind, paying nothing other than saving your money, you had enough money to buy a house.
Wow. That's unheard of nowadays.
That's just 4 years.
Wow.
Now, if you had just like, let's say 30,000 a year in London, and you grinded for 10 years on the grind, nothing else. You lived with your mum, you paid no bills, you paid no rent. That's it, just the 30, and that's 30,000 after tax. All you have is 300,000 after 10 years. That's still not enough to really buy a house. You have to grind another 10 years to be able to get something relatively okay in terms of a house in London. So that's 20 years compared to 4. What happened? So what you're probably going to discuss now is not even unique to the medical field. It's across the board. But specifically on the charts, when you look at the cost of things, some things over time have actually got cheaper. Ironically, like basically technology things, because technology basically means that as time moves on, you find easier ways to make the same thing cheaper, which is basically how phones and TVs get cheaper over time. I mean, no, some people might not think that, but it does. Whereas other things, the things that you actually need, our health, our food, our accommodation, these things go up exponentially.
The basics
go up exponentially. And just an idea, I mean, in the 60s, one person could work and feed his family and his wife and kids, and that's it, all good. Then at some point, the wife had to come out and work. Now that's not even enough. No, but it's serious. We laugh, but that's
It's
if
true,
if
it's
the
true.
trend continues, what's next?
What's next?
Kids are going to be at work. At
Kids
the age
are
of
going to
8.
work as well, just to support one family. I mean, it's, as you can see, it's getting worse. But anyway, I don't want to stop you from that. I just want to just make clear that this idea of this meme of the Matrix or going down the rabbit hole is because we are finally being able to look back and say, wait, what's happening, and why is it happening?
Yeah.
And more importantly, does it need to happen? This is the issue. I mean, some might say, oh, it's happening. But the question is, did it need to be that way? But anyway, let you continue.
That's very, very interesting what you said. And I think now more than ever, the rhetoric which Noam Chomsky propagated, obviously, I don't know about all of his views in totality, but what he mentioned with regards to wage slavery. And I remember someone in an interview asked him, okay, but you can just leave your job if you wanted to. So how's it slavery? But then his response was, okay, but you can't leave your job. Like a majority of the population, where would they get their food from if that were to be the case? So it's just very interesting how this kind of rhetoric nowadays more than ever is very, very relevant. And we'll just discuss a few statistics why, as doctors particularly, there's a lot of kind of talk about this within the kind of current climate. Okay, so the first statistic we have over here, as it's highlighted over here, is that the pay awards for junior doctors in England from 2008 to 2021 have delivered a real terms a pay cut of 26.1%. So this shows that even though their salary seems on the surface to be increasing, it's actually decreasing over the years. Yeah. And just to kind of illustrate what exactly a junior doctor is, you may think that this is someone who is only in his first few years of medicine. But actually, a junior doctor can be used to describe someone who has 10 years of experience in medicine. It's essentially anyone who's in the medical pathway until he becomes a consultant, which is the top dog, so to speak. And this applies to everyone.
Not really top done though.
Huh?
Not really top done, but we'll come to it.
Even they're not getting much. But as you can see, we have a graph here of the pay for junior doctors, and as you can see, especially after tax, the take home is not that much, especially for many years going into it. Especially when someone's that age, he will have increased responsibilities within the household, etc. Then following down from that, and these will appear on the screen as well. So this is an example of a pay slip, and as you can see, the name of the doctor is a doctor which many in the current climate feel they can empathize with and relate to. His name is Dr. Peanuts. And I think as just an ongoing joke, as the doctors feel as though they're getting peanuts. Yeah. And so this is kind of an interesting take on the payslip itself. We have 12.3% inflation and 7.3% student loan interest. So these are both negatives, right? Then we have 1.2%, 1.25% national insurance increase, and 2% pay rise. Yeah. And in total, they put 3 claps. And I think this is kind of the rhetoric which I'm hearing from the junior doctors, is though they feel that the claps which were provided for people working on the front line was kind of just a means to kind of relieve the guilt of the raw deal that they're actually getting. So an additional 10% pay cut this year is the equivalent of working 1 month for nothing, essentially, due to the inflation and the
irony of this is a lot of trusts have taken this literally. Some doctors have not got paid after 2 months of working. They've just started, presumably due to pay issues with administration. There's always admin issues, but even then that does not suffice. The doctor still has to come to work, still has to pay his rent, still has to pay his transport, still has to pay food for his family. So not paid is very, very obviously it's not acceptable at all.
We'll just run through a few of the rest of the stats.
Just to drive the point home further for the viewers as well. We've got more statistics, and they've sort of created some analogies that sort of like make a lot of people aware of the situation and sort of drives the point home. By the end of FY1, so that's after your first year after working after graduating from medicine and medical school, you've been at university for 5 years and you've worked for 1 year, you still can't afford a small Domino's margarita pizza with the hourly take-home pay rate that you'll be obtaining. The FY1 hourly take-home pay is £11.27. And a pizza costs £15. A small margarita pizza costs £15 from Domino's.
So, Ustad Muawiyah, you actually referred to the matrix earlier, and so these are people within the conventional system who have reached the zenith of academic performance, the absolute pinnacle, and they're looked upon as society as kind of the brightest, with regards to academic achievement. And rigorous kind of standards which are placed on them right from an early age. And now we're seeing what's actually the outcome for that economically. Continue.
By the end of CT2, so that's if you go down specialty training. So you've done 2 years, you've studied in medicine for 5 years, you've done 2 years after graduation of training, FY1 and FY2, you've done another 2 years of CT1 and CT2 going down the specialty route. So now you've altogether worked 4 years and you still can't afford a 6-piece KFC bargain bucket with your hourly take-home pay. Hourly take-home pay is £14.76 and a bargain bucket costs £16 essentially. It's ridiculous. You know, when you compare this to other fields, and so obviously we can't compare like for like, right? Because each field is different. But if you look at investment banking and medicine are usually compared because of the years of grind and effort that they go through, medics and investment bankers. But when an investment banker starts, essentially starting salary is considerably higher than a doctor who's been through rigorous training all these years. So
that's mainly because the source of the income is different.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that as we go after we go through the stats.
Okay.
Let's race through them.
So the last stat that we've got, second to last one, I think this will probably be the last one to just drive the point home again. By the end of ST5, you've been at university for 5 years, works for 7 years. You still can't afford a 10-piece KFC bargain bucket with your hourly take-home pay. ST5 hourly take-home pay is £18.17 and a KFC 10-piece bargain bucket costs £20.
So we have the same for the ST8. So this is just before you become a consultant. So he's been in the game for worked for 10 whole years. Probably got a big family by now. And we have the hourly pay £20.19 and a large Domino's pizza for £20.99. Another statistic we have is an F2 is paid £1,170 per month less for the same job today as compared to 2008, inflation adjusted. We have the case of two separate doctors. One graduated in 2009. Let's call him Adam. And he had £1,000 tuition fees as a F1. So it's his first year as a doctor. He earned 47.5k in today's money. That's the same as a core trainee too. So it's much more experienced than him today. The average house price was 4.5 times his annual income. As opposed to Shruti, she graduated in 2022. She had £9,000 of tuition fees. She won't out-earn Adam's FY1 salary until 3 to 5 years later into her career. The average house price is 6.8 times her annual income. Shruti will pay 100,000 to 300,000 more than Adam for her student loans. Shruti's pay will have fallen 30% throughout her entire career. Is Shruti, also a hard-working doctor, worth 30% less than Adam? And as you can see, so these are posts made by Doctors Vote, and they're basically campaigning to raise awareness for these things. We have, again, statistics of the kind of pay cut, inflation adjusted, which has occurred for all grades. And kind of just using the first principles and understanding of inflation, because a lot of the people within the doctors community, we have to be honest, and this is kind of true for the general public as well, as our teacher just mentioned, that they don't realize the true extent of what's actually happening. But this is especially true for the doctors, where we feel like they're heavily engaged in the biology books and burying their head in the desks, and they a lot of them are not actually economically savvy in order to realize this. So we just wanted to request like an explanation using the first principles to explain to doctors what's actually happening to them and what from the statistics we just discussed.
So in terms of the cost of living and the remuneration and whatnot, what we just discussed there, I mean, especially the example of Adam and I think it said Shruti?
Yeah.
Yep, Shruti. Okay. So generally speaking, there's two things happening here, which is also highlighted in what you mentioned when you compare the bankers to the doctors. There's two things here. The first thing is, how does the government fund its activities? That's the first thing. And this is let's go back to the beginning. Assume this government is essentially a person. Forget them being an organization. Think of it as a person. When you take out loans to fulfill your activities, with the promise you're going to pay back those loans later on and I guess also with interest, essentially what you're doing is you're bringing forward the future today. So imagine in your lifetime, all you potentially earn from the moment you leave university until the moment you die, your total net income would be, let's just say, £1 million. So if you went to the bank and took out a loan of £500,000 today, and you spent it on a house, that means half of your whole entire life's income has already been spent in the first year you left university.
Wow.
So that means the remainder of your life has to somehow survive on the remaining £500,000. And to make it worse, to compound the issue, because I've now spent £500,000 of my total income in 1 year, that now decreases the supply of stuff that I spent it on in that year. And that decrease in supply, obviously the demand is the same, but that decrease in supply slowly pushes the price up. So that as the years progress, because I and others like me have all spent our money early, we've now pushed the price higher because it's all been consumed. And we only have the remaining, let's say, 40 years of our life to live on the remaining 500,000 or £500,000 to somehow budget that.
Yeah.
So let's now apply that to the same thing we had here. Adam, he was able to be paid a lot because obviously the NHS, the government, they fund their things through government issued bonds, as in they take out loans and they take out whatnot and they spend money they don't have. This is the issue. They spend in advance, and they're able to do that. One of the byproducts psychologically of doing so is obviously you spend more than you really should because you don't have really a budget. I mean, you put a budget, you put an artificial limitation on what you're doing, but it's not a real limitation. If you were to compare that, to example, to an economy that goes on the gold standard, for example, as in they have gold, and don't have what's called fiat money, then they really have to deal with what they actually have. As in what is in circulation, what is in their hand, that's essentially what they have to use. And if they borrowed from someone else, they have to take it from someone else, as in he no longer has it. So you're not actually increasing the money supply, you're just using what's already there. If I borrowed money from someone else, that other person, he can't spend. So I haven't actually increased the spending, if that makes sense. I mean, yes and no, but I haven't increased in spending. Whereas in the fiat system, I can do that. I can print, I can issue new money or issue new loans under the premise that the loans will be paid back. So one of the misconceptions people have is that when you go to the bank or whatnot and you issue a loan, they think that money comes from someone else. Not really. That money is created at point of loans. Every time you take a mortgage out, the money is created on the balance sheet there and then. It's double entry. So on one side of the balance sheet is your money existed, and the other side is the asset you wanna put against that thing, so which is the house. But essentially net zero. So you flood in the market with more and more and more money to do things that you, in reality, you can't really do. Meaning you're spending money you shouldn't really be spending. But you can see. Anyway, so the point is, this is someone that described it quite accurately, a Ponzi. Whereas, and as the saying goes, you can't taper a Ponzi. I mean, you can't slow down a Ponzi. You can't turn back the wheels. Okay, you know what? Let's go back a bit. Let's try and fix this. Because the moment you try to fix it, things break. And when I say, and I do apologize to anyone at home who's listening, because sometimes I'm trying to cover a lot, and there's things I might say which might not understand exactly how and why. But essentially, as time is moving on, the government's spending more and more and more, taking out larger and larger and larger debts and trying to do more and more things. If they tried now to pay off the debt and try to move the things back, move the needle back, just the attempt on its own would cause what we're having right now.
Yeah.
And people can't survive. They can't pay their bills. They can't do this and they can't do that. And then as a government, they need to do something about it because otherwise they won't vote for you. What I just heard the other day, I just heard that they're going to do a package, an energy package to help people pay their bills.
Yeah.
Because people are complaining they can't pay their bills. And that's the reality. People can't pay their bills because the price is going higher. But when this is just after they were saying they're raising interest rates. So they're trying to draw back the drawbridge, but then something happens that to bring it back out again.
Yeah.
So they're trying to bring money in, but then they have to give out money again for so this money we're going to get to pay the electricity companies, that's essentially another stimulus package. So we got furlough, we got this package here. We're constantly having more and more money being printed because they have to.
Right, right.
And at some point, the system's going to break.
Mm.
They have one or two options. Either they let inflation go wild, which is the desired outcome. I'll explain why in a minute, which is the desired income. Or they try and pay off the debt and everyone suffers.
For how long?
Well, the thing is, the system is built that way.
Mm.
This is what people don't understand. So let's go back a bit back again so people can understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So the money we have that we use is issued from central banks. It's not that the money had to be earned through hard labor. Money is created upon demand. Now,
The fiat money.
the fiat money standard, yeah. The money is created on demand through central bank policies and whatnot. And how do you wish into existence this money? Debt. That's how it is, through loans. So someone goes, takes out a loan, and then money comes into existence. The biggest debtor will be the government themselves. They go and get loans from the central bank, or the Bank of England, or the Federal Reserve, or whatever the case may be. And that's how money is brought into existence. We also issue debt to ourselves when we go, every time we get buy a mortgage, every time we use a credit card, every time we buy a car and hire purchase, money also is created. And this is where there needs to be a balance. Sometimes we blame the government, say, oh, they're taking out these loans and these bonds and so on and so forth. But the vast majority of the money, well, I can't say vast majority, but a large portion of the money that is created is from us.
Yeah.
Because we go to the bank, we get a loan, and we buy, and we spend the money that we shouldn't really have. Anyway, so the money is created through the issuance of loans. Now, when you issue new loans, or when you issue new debt, and you spend that, you essentially are taking off the market supply. Like I said, the issue of supply and demand. So if you want to undo that, so you want to, reduce the amount of loans given out. That's the purpose of interest rates. So think the best way to describe it is that if you think of the money supply in any given country as being like a bathtub.
Okay.
And the money in the bathtub is the water in the bathtub. So there's a constant flow of water out of the bathtub because we haven't put the plug in there, so the money just flows out. But there's a constant flow of money, i.e. water, into the bathtub, which is the tap. So this is how they regulate, increase and decrease the money supply. So the tap meaning the ease of issuing loans. So if you decrease the interest rates, that means it's cheaper for me and you to get a loan. I can go to the bank and take out a loan, and all I have to do is pay back 0.2%. That's that cheap. That's like practically for free. And some countries is negative, so you pay back less. They actually are paying you to take out a loan. Yeah, like I think Sweden and other countries. But anyway, there's negative interest rates. So the point is, if you lower interest rates, you incentivize loans or money lending. So that means you're increasing the money supply in the bathtub. Now, just to complete the analogy, we said that the bathtub, the plug is out. The water is constantly flowing out. What that means, what does that part of the analogy refer to? It refers to you paying back the loan. So when you issue new loans, you have to pay it back. As you pay back your loans, you're decreasing the money supply. So think of it this way, as if you can imagine, maybe you can do some animation on the screen, but if you imagine the bank has a balance of 0. When you go to borrow money from the bank, on your bank balance, you've gone up by £100. But on their side, they've gone down by £100. So there's still 0, still net 0.
Yeah.
So when you pay back the loan, you've given 100 now, that goes down, and therefore the bank has gone up 100. So it should be net 0. And obviously they get the interest, they will hopefully get more than that. But the point is, when you go to the reason why they can issue loans and make money out of thin air is because at some point you're going to pay it back. It's not just giving you money and then do what you like. You will borrow a loan of money and eventually pay it back. So the bottom of the bath, where money is flowing out or money is being destroyed, that's us paying back the loans. So if you were to turn the tap down, as in reduce the amount of money being created, eventually the water will start to flow out. The bath will start emptying because although money is coming in, the rate at which it's going out is faster. But if you want to increase the money supply, you open the tap some more. Yeah. So therefore, more money is coming in, the bathtub will go higher and higher and higher. But here's the reason why you can't taper a Ponzi. okay, let's say we want to reduce the interest rates.
Okay.
Sorry, not reduce interest. I want to increase interest rates. Why do I want to do that? Increase interest rates basically behaves like tightening the spigot. I'm reducing the amount of money coming in.
Reducing the inflation.
Yes, no, not inflation, not inflation. I'm reducing
The number of people.
the amount of loans that people are taking.
Yeah.
If it's more and more expensive to borrow, less and less people will borrow.
Yeah.
Basically, what they're doing now.
Basically, what they're trying to do. They're trying to do now. So what happens is, as less and less people borrow, that means, remember, people are paying back their debt, so money is flowing out, but less money is coming into the system. But there's a problem, because if less people are borrowing, that means there's less money to be spent.
Okay.
So when I go shopping, I'm not going to go and buy the latest iPhone. I'm going to buy the SE version. I'm going to get the cheapest version of the iPhone because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So the knock-on effect of increasing interest rates is that we spend less. And if we spend less, that means the other side of the trade, the shops, they earn less. And if they earn less, it becomes more difficult for them to service their loans. They can't pay back the debts.
Okay.
So if you continue doing that, continue raising interest rates, and it becomes more and more difficult to take out loans, number one. People spend a lot less, and therefore traders earn a lot less, and therefore can't pay back the debt. Then what happens after? What's the next stage? Defaults. I just can't pay the money back anymore. And the default, the money is not paid back. It's still out in the system. So if I were to declare bankruptcy and it's written off, the money's still out there.
Yeah.
I didn't pay it back.
Yeah.
So on top of that, it's almost think of it like as in here is blocking the exit. So now less money is coming out of the system. So you can see. So as you can see, even if you don't want to reduce the money supply, it has knock-on effects which causes problems, which is what we have now. People can't pay their energy bills. I mean, that's a problem.
Yeah.
They can't pay their energy bills. And when they can't pay their energy bills, then the government comes in and says, okay, don't worry, we'll pay it for you. That paying for you, don't think when the government says they're going to do something for you that is free of charge. They have to now issue loans. They have to take out more debt. Hey, open the spigot again.
Right.
What's the point of tightening it then? What's the point of increasing interest rates if that's what they're ultimately going to come to?
So the thing is,
it's just
thing
a
is,
spiral.
it's with all things really. It's like zina really. It's like zina.
Yeah.
I can do the zina now, and I can get my.
We have non-Muslim viewers.
Yeah.
True.
It's like fornication, for example. I want to enjoy myself now with this woman. You know, a bit of fun
outside of marriage.
Outside of marriage, a bit of fun. It's all good. But later on, she calls me back and says, "Oh, but I'm pregnant." So now I have to deal with the long-term consequences of that little bit of fun. So same thing with regards to loans, or basing your system, your economic system based on loans. Essentially, you're trying to achieve short-term gain at the expense of long-term suffering.
The future generations as well, yeah.
So essentially, those who benefited from the systems were the older generation. Those from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Those who took the loans out early. They benefited from the system. Because remember that analogy we brought to you earlier on. By taking out loans, you are taking future income. So the guys who took out loans yesterday, they're taking money from you and me. They took it from you and me a long time ago.
Criminals.
No, it's not criminal. It's just the way the system is. Like I said, the Matrix.
Yeah.
No one knows this.
No one.
It's not something which we knew about. I give them one example of today. Yeah, something we can relate to today. Why do you reckon one of the reasons why the energy prices are going up so high?
Yeah, energy in particular, huh?
As in specifically like your electric bill, your gas bill. Why do you reckon one of the factors, not the only factor, but one of the factors that maybe we have a role to play in that, why it's gone up higher?
Yeah, increased consumption.
No, not consumption. Last year, when people already knew that things were going to start getting more expensive, it was already known. A lot of companies, electric companies, phoned people up who had time to renew their contract to try and get them to fix their money, fix their rates. So a lot of people fixed their rates for 2, 3, 4 years even.
Okay, because they knew it was...
Because they knew it was happening.
Okay.
Even in our charity, I got a call last year. My contract came to an end. They said, we're going to have to raise the cost, obviously, because things are going up higher.
Yeah.
But you can fix it for a number of years if you sign up with us now. So I was like, okay, fix it then. I was vexed because I went from 14 kilowatt per hour, 14 pence per kilowatt hour, to 24. I'm like, what the heck? That's almost double.
That's almost double.
But it turns out a year later, that's now becoming cheap because they're going to go up even higher.
Yeah.
So what happened? What does this got to do with what I just mentioned? Because I and others have fixed our rates and how much we pay, at some point the electric companies are going to be in loss because I'm actually paying cheaper than it's turn out to cost. So therefore, others who had not fixed their rates have to now take up the slack.
Oh, okay.
So part of the reason why energy prices have gone up so higher is because energy companies as a whole, they need to make profit. And they have a large number of people on their balance sheet who they can't capitalize and raise rates on them because it's fixed.
I see.
So think of it like that, similar like that. So those in the 80s and 90s, they fixed their income by taking out the loans and getting the houses and that stuff earlier on. And now we later on have to deal with the fact that there just isn't that much money or things available. So that's what I'm saying. If let's flip the scenario. If the government came out and said, okay, look, due to emergency measures, all fixed rate contracts are ended and everyone has to pay market value. We will still pay lots, but it will even out overall.
Yeah, would do. Yeah.
Because there's not some who have got really cheap and then others have really expensive. Everyone will kind of pay in the middle. But because of some have taken out early and locked in their profits early, and others take up the slack for those that came later on. That's essentially what happens with all this the debt scenario. The early generations locked in their profits early, got their houses on cheap, got all their cars on cheap, got all their investments early, and later on we have to fight off the scraps, basically. I mean, that's in a nutshell. And there's a lot to be said about it, but a lot of ways. But essentially, the reason why I've always been for Bitcoin as a standard is because I view it as an exit from these games. Because you can't create Bitcoin out of thin air. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It is there. It's like gold. It's there. You use it. The only way I could spend it is get it from someone who has it. The government at the moment, or governments, not just UK, I'm not penalising the UK specifically, it's just how it works across the board. Governments across the world, they have this policy where they can print and they can issue loans and do projects and have all these. I mean, even look at the example like Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Before the collapse happened now, they had loads of projects that they built in congregation with China and whatnot that turned out to be what's called white elephants, as in things they spent billions on that had brought no extra value.
Yeah, yeah.
You wouldn't do that if it was your own money. People act differently when they're spending their own money.
Yeah.
If they have a budget, if they know they can't go to someone and just get a bailout. Even the whole idea of a bailout, a government bailout, all you're doing is just again taking more money from the future to pay for the now, as opposed to dealing with the now. It's basically like a classic case of a person who can't manage his credit cards. At some point, he goes and gets another credit card to pay the old credit card, and it just spirals out of control.
Yeah.
It's just on a larger scale, really. So one last thing I want to point out, which bring back to the point which you mentioned about bankers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Why would bankers get paid so much more than everyone else? It's called the Cantillon effect, because they're close to the printing press. The money is freshest at the source. No, I'm serious. Think of it this way. How does inflation work?
Central banks.
No, how does inflation work? So here's a thought experiment. If you have a village, and in that village, all they have to use in that village, everyone, all their joint wealth, the money, all they have is about £100. That's it. So they farm, they buy meat, they buy vegetables, they do all the stuff that they do and spend. They're only circulating £100 in that village. One guy discovers a way to print off another £100. So he does. He prints it off, and he gets excited. Wow, I got £100 for free. I've got literally the wealth of the whole village for free. I'm gonna do it again. So he does it another 10 times. So he's now got £1,100, for example.
Okay.
Will the city or that village have inflation?
Of course.
What do you reckon?
No.
Why not?
He hasn't. So he's printed off 1,100.
Yeah,
He's
it's
got
in his
1,100.
bedroom, sitting there.
Is he using it? He's transacting it?
He hasn't used it yet. It's just sitting there.
No idea.
It won't do anything.
Oh, because it's not in circulation.
Perfect.
If it's not in circulation,
okay.
yeah.
It's just there.
Okay.
Inflation is a byproduct of supply and demand. It's not just the increase in money supply. So there is difference of opinion amongst the economists.
Mm.
For example, the Austrians, they see inflation as the increase in money supply. So they say the increase in money supply is inflation, and the increase in prices is a symptom of inflation. And others say, no, inflation is the increase of the prices. However way you look at it, the fact is, just because he printed it, just because he has it, doesn't mean prices go up.
Okay.
Prices only go up when he starts spending it now. When he goes to the market and splashes that and buys all the stuff in the shelves and buys all the wheat and all the barley and all the stuff like that, and people can't afford, or people can't even find anything left, they need to eat.
Yeah.
Then they start bidding higher and higher to get the last remaining dregs of supply. So same thing with governments. Even if a government wants to print off trillions and just leave it in their coffers and not even use it as collateral for anything, just there, it doesn't cause inflation. It only causes inflation when you actually use the thing.
But sorry, Ustad, sorry to cut you off, but the issue is any individual will use it. Within any system, anybody would use that.
Yeah, but my point wasn't that. My point was
being
that inflation or the increase in supply or the increase of prices takes time. Because you have to start spending, and people have to start realizing the limited supply and start bidding up the price. So one point is that just the fact that he had £1,100,
it's not the issue.
It's not the issue. When he starts using it, then the prices start creeping upwards. So back to the issue of our analogy of the bankers and the doctors. Why do bankers get paid higher? Because they're closer to the printing press. They're literally at the door when it was printed. It's there. So when they spend, not only do they get to spend the freshly printed money, they get the cheaper prices.
Yeah, because it hasn't
affected the prices yet.
It hasn't occurred yet. Yeah.
And then later on, as the money goes as it goes from their hand to the shopkeeper, from the shopkeeper to the tailor, from the tailor to the other guy, as it starts filtering through the economy, as you go further and further down and prices creep up slowly, the guy later on, the 10th guy down the line, and he's now his purchasing power is a lot less. So the Cantillon effect basically means those who are closest to the printing press get the privilege.
Right.
Which is essentially the same thing we said about the people in the 80s and 90s. They got the privilege. They got to spend and buy the houses and the expensive cars and whatnot when things were cheaper. Now, as years have passed on, prices have gone up, we are dealing with the consequences of that down the line. So that's why you'll always find, whatever sector you're in, those who deal with banks will always get paid vastly more than anyone else. Even I remember when I finished college, I was looking for IT work.
Yeah.
Because IT is also my thing, hence why I'm into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I obviously being Muslim, I don't. It's not allowed to work for banks or anyone who deals with interest because it's against Islam. So all the job offers I got, that was literally double everyone else. It's always the banks, and I was like, oh, that's so painful. I can literally get paid either back in the 90s, 1,500 a month or 3,000 a month, and I'm like, that's when you start looking for fatwas, isn't it? It's like looking for the allowance. Wow, can someone allow it just one time? But yeah, because they can do that because remember, they are closer to the spigot. So don't be surprised that you have these financial services, and a lot of these financial services are based on that because they're based on loans. Again, and the medical field, especially the NHS, they are the other end of the trade. As in, they're the ones who essentially exist based on government budgets and whatever the case may be. So it's very different. It's very different, and you can't really equate the two because, like I said, the source of income is different. The source of income is different. Anyway. So that's just my little rant.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for your insights. It's very interesting, as you said, to think about how fragile the system actually is. I was reading the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, recently, and it discussed how few people have to just remove their money from the banks for the whole system to...
Yeah, because, like I said, when people talk about the issue of bank runs, because banks run on what's called fractional reserve spending. So basically, they only need to have a fraction of the money in reserve for to issue loans, and so what that means is if they essentially have, sorry, let me go back a step. So how do banks issue loans? I kind of gave an allusion to earlier on with regards to the mention of double entry spending. So when they issue new money, they're not giving out your money that you put in the bank to another guy who's borrowing the money. That's not how it works. They work on the idea of how much can they lend and what can they use as collateral to back up that loan. So if you, it's pretty much like how, like in Islam, some call it rahan. So if I want to borrow like £100 from you, you say, okay, I'll lend you £100, but if you don't pay me back, what guarantees, how do I get my money back? So I say, oh, look, I got a ring, family heirloom. Hold on to this ring. It's got value. I don't want to sell it. Just hold on to it. That will be your equivalent of £100. So, and also if I don't come back, you can sell it and get your £100 back. So essentially that's how banks work. So when you go to buy a house and do a mortgage, the house itself becomes the collateral. It becomes the other side of the trade. Remember, they're on the negative.
Right.
They've got negative £100 after you borrowed £100. So you've got £100. What's stopping them being in debt? I mean, they've got negative £100. What backs that will be the house. So that's what I'm saying. People think that banks need money to issue loans. They don't. But, which is why a vast majority of the loans that banks issue, there is no money, physical money they can issue to give it back to you because it's all tied up in assets.
Yeah.
So if everyone wants to withdraw their money in cash, there is no cash. If the bank wanted to honor the loans, honor your cash withdrawals, that means they would have to liquidate their assets. They have to go on the market and start selling houses, start selling the cars, start selling the things that they have on collateral, just so you can withdraw your money. Which is why the system can't work. Which is why bank runs is so devastating for banks, because essentially it breaks the system of money lending. If everyone's taking their money out right now, that will cause the banks to force other people to liquidate their assets. That's why banks don't mess about when it comes to mortgages. As soon as they see signs of weakness, that you're not going to honor your thing, they want to capitalize and not be any loss. So they'll just come in, sweep over, and just take your house and go. And speak to anyone who's lost property because they're going to keep up the mortgage, and they'll tell you exactly how and why and how swift the banks work. Because, like I said, the only guarantee that they can pay, that they can settle this debt. Remember, they're negative. The only way they can settle this debt is the liquidation of the assets. And that's not immediate. Selling a house takes months. And you're at the door right now, out on money now.
Yeah.
So that's why the system is over collateralized. Whereas on a Bitcoin standard, for example, you have your own money. And if you borrowed someone else's money, they can only give you what they have. So it's a different system. But that's essentially how banks work, and why bank runs are so devastating, because they it's not just the fact that they've lent out money more that they don't have. It is backed by something, but it's not liquid. And the worst thing is, sometimes what it's backed by isn't worth anything, which is what caused the 2008 financial crisis, because they had a lot of subprime mortgages for houses that the mortgage was worthless. And that was backing loans that were enormous. Imagine I borrowed £1,000 from you, and I've got backing it a chewing gum. And I'm saying, yeah, I'm fully reserved, fully backed, and then people start withdrawing their money, and all you got to back up your grand is a chewing gum, then it collapses. But it's not just you who collapses, because when you collapse and can't pay your debt and you default, other banks who you owe money to as well, they can't pay their money back.
That's crazy.
And then when they collapse, it's a cascading effect. That's why the government had to step in and bail out the banks, because if they didn't, one after the other, as all banks are interwoven with each other, they would have all collapsed, because it's all based on credit. It's all based on loans. That's why my general advice to everyone, doctors and non-doctors alike, is don't go into that system. Exit from this mentality of living on credit. Live within your means. So even if things were to go bad, it's not affecting you. I mean, it is affecting you in terms of the prices of things and whatnot, but in terms of you're not have your property liquidated and whatnot. You live literally on your means. Anyway, I've ranted on too much.
No, that's very good, sound advice. We do appreciate that. Just to move on from that, we have discussed a few first principles related to inflation, what's actually happening with the doctors with their 26.1% pay cut. So my next discussion would kind of be a two-part question, and it would be that basically when the doctors of the society, individuals who are doing a great job for society, and every kind of member of the population respects them, values the work that they're doing very heavily, when they in particular are feeling that they're not getting their worth for their labor, does that suggest that the government kind of has failed horribly in order to compensate appropriately, kind of morally? Like, is there kind of sincere nature to help others being taken advantage of? And then the next question, kind of related to that, would be is that a lot of people, they basically believe that the taxation, that the tax money that they're giving, and all of that pulled together is what is being used to determine the budgets for the NHS. So they feel that, okay, doctors are not paid enough because the government, like for example, because there's a certain amount from the tax which can only be given to them. So whereas the money can actually come into existence, perhaps it's just a question of lack of prioritization for the doctors. But how does the government actually spend it? So is the tax an afterthought of bringing that money back for the debt which they've issued, or is it the case of they collect the tax and then they, from that money, they give the they give it to the doctors? So the question in a nutshell is, what is the solution for this, for the doctors to get appropriate pay? What is the solution? What can be done?
So I'll answer the second part because I actually forgot the first question. So in terms of the way governments work is, if you think of it this way, governments can't really function adequately, I guess. I mean, I guess they could, but they don't want to. But I guess they can't really function on taxes in the sense of, I take money from you and then I use that money to fund whatever I need to do. Why can't they do that? Why can't they function that way? Because you may delay in paying your taxes. You may not pay adequately. You may not have a certain amount. So if it is the case that they have to wait until tax receipts before they do something, things won't get done. So they work on the opposite. They issue the loan, get the money advanced to them, set the budgets, and then from then they chase you up. So essentially, without people realizing it, we are all taking out loans, even if you have no mortgage, even if you have no hire purchase, car buying, purchasing of a car, whatnot. We all, as a society, based on the social contract, take out loans all the time. The government takes out loans on our behalf. So when you pay your taxes, essentially, what the idea is, you're paying back your fair share of the debt.
Yeah,
that's how it works. But the thing is, tax receipts are dependent on two things. Number one, you paying it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't pay it and you're able to avoid it, then it's not there. And secondly, your own income. So in good times, you make lots of money and therefore you can pay lots of taxes. And in bad times, you can't make money and you can't pay back your taxes. And therefore the tax receipts go down. But the thing is, if this inflow of money, taxes, goes up and down, it fluctuates, but the outflow is pretty much the same. As in, they decide and they put budgets and sometimes increase due to demand. There's no actual connection. There's a disconnect between the money generated and the money spent because of loans. If you were to cut out from the system loans and only live on what you actually have, therefore your budget is based on reality. I don't have £100 today. I only have £80. So I'm going to have to spend somehow and live on £80. Whereas if I have a credit card, I can still spend £100 and figure out later on how to find an extra 120 quid. That's essentially how the different psychology of spending money. And I give this example so everyone can understand. A real life example. If you had right now £1 million, someone just gifted it to you like that, as in you don't have money, and now someone's giving you £1 million. How many people out there would go and spend all of it on a £1 million house, as in like that?
Not many, no?
Not many. Why? Because once they've bought the house, effectively they're now poor again.
Yeah.
So what they actually would do is they might buy a £500,000 house and have the other half. Or maybe just invest it and rent. Or my point is, they wouldn't do what they could do with a mortgage. They would get a mortgage for a £1 million house, knowing that you've spent over a period of time because I still have money to earn and whatnot.
Yeah.
And some people actually do that. A lot of rich people, they actually do that. They were actually they're millionaires. They're billionaires even, and they're still taking out loans. Because why am I spending my money when I can spend someone else's money? That's the slogan.
Yeah.
So the mind. My point in this saying is the mindset is completely different. The mindset of a borrower spending someone else's money is a lot more loose and fluid. I don't mind spending this. I don't mind doing that because I'll pay it back later. If you have a limited budget, you think completely different. You'd wait, actually. You know what? I'll do it later on. I'll do it later on. So that's apply that mindset to the government. They can issue bonds. They can do what they need to do to get money in, and then they'll define the money later on. If that's how you behave, then they can give out these lavish promises. I'll promise I'll do this. I'll promise I'll do that. I mean, how many times have you heard one politician say when they're campaigning to become prime minister, I will try to find the money to do X, Y, and Z. No, they always tell you we're gonna do it.
Yeah, that's true.
How can you say you're gonna do it? Do you know how much money do you have? You're in debt. The UK government is in debt. So how are you telling me you're going to do X, Y, and Z when you haven't got the money? Because they know they can just get the money and then pay it back later on. So in terms of the issue of how NHS is funded, because it's funded backwards.
Yeah.
How do you fix that? The population increases, cost of medicine increases. Things are constantly changing. Therefore, you have to constantly meet those demands, and you have an open check or checkbook to.
It's even worse now because of the pandemic. They had to borrow even more money.
Yep.
So this is exactly, as you said, from a borrower's mindset, it can be loose. So we have examples, for example, let's say for the COVID response, right? £4 billion of unusable PPE was bought in the first year of the pandemic, and they just had to burn that essentially. That was, a significant amount of money which they had to kind of use for the COVID response.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? We just learned that. But with this in mind, even if we understand that the system has inherent flaws within it, right? Why can't the doctors demand more from that file? Like, surely it makes sense that the doctors should be able to get a significant amount.
Unfortunately, this is where I may upset some people. I don't know. But before I answer that question, but if you can pin that, I want to go back to the first question, which I skipped because I didn't hear. I forgot what it was. What was the first question we had? You had a question right above the issue of the taxation. There's another question. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was just with has the government failed
that was it,
the doctors, which is a very important member of the society.
Yeah.
No one will debate that.
Yeah. So there's this ongoing debate, and I'm not claiming to know everything. This is just, so whoever's listening to this, just take it with a pinch of salt. Take it as part of your resources to make your own decisions. But fundamentally, there is a disconnect between what the hospitals, doctors are doing and the costs involved, and the patients that take advantage of this service. There's a disconnect. Why is that? NHS as a system is a social system whereby everyone pays their part and it gets spread across the board. Now, as opposed to the American system, and I'm not saying America as in I love America or I love their system. I'm just saying their system is a private system. There's no, I mean, they have Medicaid and Medicare, but I'm just saying their system is by you pay for your medical services. So essentially, there is supply and demand here. When you have a system where there is no supply and demand factors, I can go in and I can get any number of treatment, even if I can waste doctors' time even. And it comes to me at no cost. My decision making is very different. And the reason why I say this is a sensitive topic because realistically, the counter argument or the argument for the NHS is strong. Meaning, brother, how can you say that a person who has got cancer and needs immediate treatment right now and hasn't got the money to pay for it, that he can't get the treatment? Because that's essentially what the alternative would be, isn't it? If you haven't got the money for it, then essentially you can't get the treatment. But that's how things are. That's how supply and demand is. Let me explain. Why are medicines the price that they are? Why are the PPE things, why are they the price that they are? Because someone's willing to pay for it. Medicines or medical companies, pharmaceuticals, they know how much the government's can pay, and the government's not paying literally out of their own pocket. They will say, okay, I'll pay for whatever it needs to be. But basically, there's no competition, realistically speaking. And it's not just to blame NHS. I'm just saying, generally speaking, if you're producing a product, you're producing something, and the other person who's buying it is buying it regardless.
Yeah.
There's no price discovery. The mechanism of price discovery doesn't exist. So you're asking, how can doctors get paid more? Well, the answer would be that we pay more. If the cost of living in society is going up, then we as consumers of medical treatment should pay more. So you're asking how are you going to get paid more? It's because as in we would pay more. That's how markets work. But when we don't necessarily pay more, because there's no connect between two, or more importantly, you as doctors have no control over the cost of services. There's no transaction here. Therefore, when the market prices are changed, there is no decision making be made. So, for example, petrol. That's an example of petrol. As a classic example, everyone has a car. You seen the prices of petrol going up every day. It's getting more and more expensive. Like happened the other day. Can you tell me that you didn't go on and try and top up quickly before it goes higher?
Yeah.
See what's happening. So because of the price action, you're reacting to the market. And when prices are very high, another thing, now prices have gone up from, I remember when it was COVID time, it was like 90 something pence per litre. And now it's like then it got up to as high as £1.80 even in some places.
Yeah.
When it got that high, as in literally double, what does some people do? Stop driving. Took bus. As in we reacted to the market and we withdrew our spending. So because of this give and flow, it goes up too high, I spend less. It goes cheap, I buy more. This is what causes price discovery. That does not exist in the medical field. If the price of certain medicines go up higher because of whatever the reason, there's no people not buying it on the reverse. So there's no way for that really to actually happen. So to be honest, we might blame the government that it's gone up higher and higher and higher, but what can they really do? There's no way for the market to actually price in the increase of anything. Or worse than that, if they do try and react, their reactions will be very slow. Or even central, as in, what's the difference between... So one of the reasons why the markets work so efficiently, or they should work so efficiently, is because there are thousands and millions of people all reacting at once. Whereas in a centralized system, which is why communism failed, a few people are making decisions. Maybe I would decide I'm gonna pay less for this because I want to, whatnot, because that's just me. Maybe the needs are more than what I know. Maybe the needs are less than what I know. And that happened not during communist Russia. There were many cases where certain things were overbought and they had literally stockpiles of things that they was not used.
Yeah.
Whilst other things that were needed, they weren't purchased because it was centrally decided economy. And that's essentially how NHS works. I mean, I guess there is private sectors as well, but that's essentially how it is. And I think that I'm sure you guys know more than me. A lot of doctors are going private now, as in they're working for private organizations. Why?
Yeah.
Because that's now a market. And they can pay you a better price because they're receiving the right remuneration, or a better one, you could say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I completely understand. So if we understand that there is a disconnect between the free market economics, okay, for the medical field, right? Would one be able to make the argument that, fine, forget free market economics, but from a moral basis, the doctors should be paid more, even if that means issuing more debt, which the government has capability to do, and they've done many times, as they've shown within the COVID pandemic and previous in history.
See, the problem is that
from that perspective.
Problem is, if I'm going to put my mind in the shoes of a government official, and I'm trying to balance the books and trying to prevent this Ponzi scheme from collapsing, which is what it is. Paying you more makes the situation worse.
It's prioritization.
No, listen carefully.
Okay.
Paying you more makes the situation worse. Paying all government employees makes the situation worse. The more money you have, the more money you spend. The more money you spend, more inflation there is. The more money I need to give you to keep up with that.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So as you can see here, morals, this is why the markets is so important, because markets is amoral. There's no morals about it. It's just the raw facts. This is the price of things. This is how it needs to be. It is what it is. Whereas it's not an issue of, it's not fair and it's unfair. It's not a fair question. There's limited resources available and you have to allocate those resources adequately. That's all it is.
Understood. Let me just shake up the floor a bit, because there's actually recent talks for doctors to go on strike, which would then impact the what we were discussing with regards to the market dynamics
Yep.
of supply and demand as well,
Yeah.
in order to get the government to do that.
Yeah.
Now we've seen in many other industries strikes being more kind of frequent, more easy to implement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like TFL. I'm sure you've experienced
Yeah, yeah,
days
yeah,
when that
yeah.
occurs. But doctors don't tend to go down that route. Maybe due, of course, there's many reasons for that, and just completely understandable. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to ask, what do you think the impact of something like that would be on the market dynamics, which you
So
previously mentioned?
this is the beauty of the market. I mean, I give you an example of the Messenger of Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the prices of certain things went up.
Yeah.
So his companions, or some may understand that as disciples, whatnot, those around him said, "O Messenger of Allah, O Prophet of Allah, please set the prices for us. Fix the prices because it's getting too expensive." And he replied by saying, "Verily it is Allah is one who sets the prices." And he refused to get involved. And he says he refused to be, he does not want to be the person who, on a day of judgment, anyone has claim of oppression on him. What do you mean by oppression? If I fix a price to something, like you're selling bread, you make bread, and I fix the price of bread to £1. It costs you whatever it costs you, and you sold it normally for £1.20, but I'm fixing it to £1. I'm not oppressing you. I'm preventing you from selling it for what you need to sell it for to earn a living. Or maybe it costs 90p. I normally sell it for 90p, but I fix it to £1. So now I'm pressing the consumer by forcing him to pay more for his bread. By fixing a price, you artificially distort price action. As in, we don't know what this price really is because I fixed it to something arbitrary. And that's effectively what happens when it comes to government intervention in the markets. You are essentially fixing and distorting the price action. So back to the issue of the issue of strikes and whatnot. Essentially, you're trying to get what you feel you need to get, an increase in wages, something that would be solved if you had control over the price of your labor, but you're not. That's the problem. Realistically, if the government said today, you know what, this whole NHS thing is just long, bunda, you just guys do your own thing. You charge what you need to charge. You do what you need to do, whatnot. I'm not saying that's a solution, by the way. I'm just saying as a thought experiment. Then the whole idea of strikes would be null and void because you would actually charge what you need to survive. And you will speak to the pharmaceutical company and say, look, I can't buy all these this thing at the price you're charging because it's too expensive. So I'm going to go to someone else. And then you now induce competition amongst them now. That's another problem. Because I'm not blaming the NHS. I'm not blaming the government. It's a whole system. It's a system upon our system. For example, patents on medical on medicine. Because that's essentially a monopoly. That's making or giving you the power to fix prices. If, for example, if you discovered a new treatment or new medical thing and others can produce the same, then they should be able to do so. And then they will compete now on the price of that thing. And the price will come down to what it actually costs to make with a slight margin to justify that. But because you can have medical patents on certain drugs and only you can make certain drugs and certain, therefore there is no competition. So if they say to you, yeah, it's going to be £100 a tablet, you got no choice, otherwise just suffer. So I'm saying it's not the whole thing. There's so many different parts that are gone wrong that just striking will only force them to do something they probably don't want to do, and may even have a byproduct in a negative. Who knows how it would happen? I don't claim to know how the inner workings of the NHS, but the point is, essentially, you're essentially trying to force the government to do what I guess many medical doctors don't want to do. What I mean by that is they don't want the NHS to go. They want to keep the NHS, but they want to force them to raise the price, which they wouldn't be able to do if they had no NHS. Does it make sense? They want to have their cake and eat it. If it was a free market and doctors worked and had their own establishment, their own little practice, and they charged their fees and whatnot, then doctors would also compete amongst themselves. I will go to a cheaper doctor, or I'll go to the other doctor who may be more expensive, but he's got good service. There'll be competition.
Yeah.
But there is no competition. Every GP is the same GP, every transfer. It's all the same. So I don't have the solution for you, by the way. I'm just saying that there are inherent problems that that transcends even what the government can do. There's only so much they can really do.
Very.
As long as you abide by this system, these are the problems you're going to have, and there's no avoiding it. That's just literally what it is. As long as you have that, number one, what's the system? A system based on debt. A system where you socialize individual problems to everybody. So therefore, if I have a headache, I'm going to now call 999, I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, and I'm going to get all this treatment for just a headache. And I'm going to take all these resources because of a headache. And I'm just saying, you essentially, you almost belittle your craft. Your craft is a highly skilled profession, saving lives, and it's essentially being belittled by the fact that anyone can just go in there and it almost has no value. If that makes sense. So and also one last point, just to make the case clear. If a doctor, his income is based on his performance, meaning that if he's a crap doctor, no one's gonna go to him. Then what would he do? Get better at being a doctor.
Yeah.
As in socializing things, you can, in a way, at some level, be complacent. I can do certain things. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know in the medical field there's a lot of checks and balances to prevent that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying, everyone who's probably listening to this knows of a doctor who's rubbish and gets away with it because he's not rubbish that bad that people died. He's bad, but it's not that bad.
The slight incompetence, basically.
It's slight incompetence, but is bad enough that he's just on the line. The line that he could improve on, but there's no really incentive to do so. I get paid the same, everything's the same, nothing's changed.
That's interesting point also, because I mean, I don't know about the incompetent side of things, but in terms of the work rate and effort, you tend to see that in the NHS. So a doctor, because of the understaffing or not being valued because of their pay, they might not go the extra mile that they would do for a specific patient.
Bruv, listen, it's not just the medical field. It's across the board. My mum is a chef, and she said that after the pandemic, loads of chefs left the field to become plumbers, even. And you think, wait, why are you a chef for like Michelin star restaurants now becoming a plumber or an electrician? Because they're not getting paid enough. Remuneration is not there. And I'm sure there are many people who could be really good doctors who are just saying, no, this is long. Why am I working 12 hours or even longer shifts and I'm getting paid pennies? When I can literally just go and sell on Amazon. And actually, on that note, I actually know someone
Who left?
who stopped being a pharmacist, not a doctor, that's a similar thing, stopped being a pharmacist, left pharmacy to sell locks on Amazon.
Wow.
I mean locks, just for your door, a lock. He tried it out and discovered that there was more money selling locks on Amazon and shipping it in a box than saving lives. This is what's going to happen as long as you prevent the market from doing its thing. So what can the government do to fix it? I don't know, realistically, because at the end of the day, the only way to fix it is to charge more. I mean, trying to say charge more is to get more money in from us as in taxation. But we're all suffering. We can't pay it. So I'm saying, you see the system is broken.
There's an argument to be made, so just on that point.
Go for it.
So let's say, as you mentioned, a lot of people are leaving certain professions, right? And we all know a lot of doctors are also leaving the doctor to maybe even work abroad. So they're leaving the system. That's my point. So the more people that, as with supply and demand, the more people that leave the system, wouldn't that then incentivize for them to sort of raise the wages or the salary that doctors are getting to try and attract more doctors to come? Because that's what essentially people are getting at in this whole industrial strike, is they're trying to make that point clear that the more people that leave, eventually you're going to end up meeting the demands of doctors.
So one of the things that's interesting, people have these discussions about economics, basically. This is essentially what we're talking about, is economics. And one of the interesting things that Thomas Sowell mentioned actually in his book about economics, he mentioned that in paradise, Adam and Eve, in paradise, there was no economics because everything was in abundance. Adam he didn't have to balance his efforts. He just reach his hand out and eat. Only when after he was exited from paradise and came on planet Earth, then economics was born because there was scarcity. So when it comes to the NHS, for example, people say, I want more pay. What they fail to realize is the other side of the trade. If you give the doctors more money, that means you have to take it from somewhere else. People often forget that very important point, which is why I said open markets work more efficiently, because you actually are doing that. When you allocate more funds to medicine, you have to take it away from security. When you add more money to security, you have to take it away from energy. You have to add more to your energy bill. You have to balance what you actually have. So if you just want to increase the money to give to the doctors, they don't just come out of thin air. Someone has to pay for it. If we pay for it, that means you have to increase taxes, and then people will complain, or just not pay it, or just can't pay it. If you don't increase taxes and just rebalance the budget, the balance sheet, then what you'll have is cutting back somewhere else. Or we have to employ less cleaners, or we have to employ less security, and you have problems there. There's a constant balancing act between one thing and the other. And this is why I'm saying that this is the unfortunate reality of economics, is that there is no solution to every problem. Some things may have to suffer, and this is the painful reality of life. Sometimes, I mean, for example, and it's a painful thing to say, but you can't save every life. Some things just can't be afforded. For example, imagine there was a pandemic. For example, imagine assuming that the COVID jabs actually worked, and maybe they do. Who knows? I'm not a doctor. You guys know this. But imagine it actually worked and actually saved lives. But then there was a country who couldn't afford it. They can't afford it. If they wanted to afford it, they have to take away from somewhere else to do it. My point is, you can't pay for everything. So if you demand and strike and do all that kind of stuff to get more pay, just be aware that it has to come from somewhere else. So you may get more wages in your pocket, but you might find that you have less resources. You may even be told, I don't know how you guys, how the communications happen amongst doctors, but you may be told indirectly, you can't prescribe certain medicines because it's more expensive. You have to prescribe cheaper medicines. It may be the case that there might be longer waiting times because there are less doctors available. You pay for it in other ways. And one very important point, which is when they compare socially based medical infrastructure like NHS and private ones, is that although you pay money for your treatment, NHS you also pay for it, but in a different way. You pay for it in time. What you could have your treatment within a week.
That's so true.
In the private sector, you will have to wait months.
Yeah.
I had an issue back in 2017. I guess it's still ongoing, but it's not a big issue. And they put me on the waiting list for treatment back in 2017. Did you hear that? 2017. I haven't had it yet.
You haven't had it yet?
No. That's 2017. He said, yeah, we're putting on a waiting list and we'll let you know when.
5 years, yeah?
5 years ago.
Have you followed up?
No, I spoke to a doctor the other day, and he said to me, "Oh, is there anything else?" There's this issue, and he said, "Oh, maybe they forgot about it." I said, "Yeah, probably, because that's what happens, isn't
People have
it?"
been waiting.
But think of it this way:
Yeah.
why can I be forgotten? Because I'm not a paying customer. Would you forget someone's going to pay you money?
No.
You wouldn't. But I'm not their customer. Well, you've shifted. Same thing like Google. Google gives you all these things for free. Why? Because you're not the customer. You're the product. They sell you to their real customers, which is the companies who pay for ad revenues. So you've just shifted your customer base. So I'm saying the same thing with regards to the bank, the government. And this is a bold statement. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But we are not the government's customer. We are the product. Meaning, there are banks out there who are making money from this. The Bank of England is making a lot of money. Every time the government issues new bonds and they have to pay it back, they're making money. Banks are making. I mean, even an example with regards to. I mean, just an example of who really are the customers. COVID happened, lockdown, everyone's struggling. The government said, "Don't worry, if you're a business, we'll help you out. You could take out a loan of £50,000 to help your business. We'll cover the debt. Don't worry. About it. We'll cover the interest." So I called the bank myself, because I don't believe in loans anyway. But I wanted to see the scam myself. I wanted to see it in my own eyes. So I said to the bank, "So it's interest free, yeah?" And they goes, "No, there's interest, but the government's paying for it." So I said to them, "So if I pay zero interest, I just borrow the money and I pay it back in a year, is zero interest. Why don't you just make it 0% interest rather than government paying for the interest?"
Okay.
You probably already see the sleight of hand there. And it's, oh, that's just how the government has made a policy. That's not how the government made a policy. What's happening is that the government wanted to bail out the banks. They wanted to channel money into their pockets. Without telling you, we're paying the bank's money. We're giving the banks money to help them during the system. So what they do is that they said, okay, what we'll do, we'll find you some cannon fodder. We'll find you some punters to bring you some money. And we'll channel money to you in that way. And we'll package it by saying we're helping them. They're not helping you. They're helping the banks. They're the ones who are making the money. Let's look at the same scenario again, same thing again, in another way. Recently, I think Michael Gove, one of the MPs, he had an idea to help us get onto the housing market, the housing ladder. What's his idea? I want to put forward a proposal that if you get a mortgage, that you'll be allowed to use your housing benefit to pay off your mortgage. So you're using your government subsidy or your government aid to pay your mortgage.
It's a similar concept as what you just described, yeah.
So it's packaged. He's telling you this is to help you get on the housing ladder. But what's really happening? Banks make money through loans. In economic downturns, people don't take out loans because they're scared.
Yeah.
So there's less punters in coming in to take money. How do you bring more people to the market? Incentivize them. If you take out a loan, don't worry, man. We got it covered. We'll pay. You can stay at home or either pay in a low-paid job or unemployed entirely, and you can use your government aid to pay your mortgage. So basically, they're bringing in the punters, because if they don't do that, less people will be buying, and if less people buy, the price of houses have start coming down. And here's the key: if the prices of houses start coming down, the collateral for the loans get hit. Remember?
Oh yeah, because that's what they use.
That's what they use to back up their loans. If your mortgage is backed up by your house, and now you're in negative equity, your house that you're living in is not even worth what you owe them. The bank now doesn't want to go down. They want to close that. So how do I stop that spiral downwards? Bring more punters into the market. Keep the house prices up. So they don't be deceived to think that this is all to help us. It's not. We are not the customers.
That's unbelievable.
We are the product.
Yeah.
So just to kind of take that concept and tie it to a different thing which we have, okay, within the medical field. Not just doctors take this, but many other professions as well. But we wanted to talk specifically about doctors as a lot of the doctors are finding out that they're paying incredible amounts for their student loans over the years. They're still not able to pay it. With regards to the NHS pension, I believe the employer matches the salary, the inputs for the NHS pension by 20.68%, if I'm not mistaken. With regards to these two concepts, is this something to help us, or is it the opposite? And would you advise someone to engage in it, or does it perpetuate wage slavery, or what is the actual outcome of this? We're actually seeing a lot of doctors coming out of retirement, coming back after their kind of in their pensioning years, just to top up their pension, and we're just kind of trying to understand how this all works. It is very difficult to understand as well. I think Raoul Pal as well recently was discussing the challenges with pension with regards to the aging population, etc. So we just wanted to request your take on that.
Hopefully we started off talking about the Matrix. And hopefully, but so far in this discussion, we've touched upon so many topics that are all connected in this kind of spiral pyramid. And you just now touched upon student loans and pension, two huge black holes in the balance sheet, because they essentially are a Ponzi in the most extreme forms. So, for example, issue of student loans. Back to what I mentioned before, in economics, things have to be paid. Someone has to pay the teachers. Someone has to pay the rent or electricity costs for this. All these resources that come to training someone has to pay for it.
Yeah.
And if you do so, and if you're paying for it later on, you are bringing forward your future today. But the reality is, as the cost of the future, the cost of these things are going higher and higher and higher, therefore the student loans has to go up to match. It's just what it is. First we had grants. Think of it, in the 80s, you had student grants where you didn't pay anything back.
Yeah.
That was the stimmy check. That was the stimulus check from before. You got free money.
Yeah.
Which at some point, you can't continue that. Then we had £1,000 you paid for your student tuition, which was like okay, it's still a stimulus check because it doesn't cost you £1,000 to train. It costs you a lot more than that,
Yeah.
but it was still something. So there's a part where you pay, and there's a part where the government pays for it. But again, you're still taking money from the future. So as the price is going higher and higher, get more and more expensive to pay the student loans, all we're seeing is a manifestation of what I said earlier on. The guys at the beginning locked in their energy costs, and now the other guys later on have to pay the higher price. So basically, we're just living the ramifications of what has already happened when we were probably before we were even born, or when we were young. When we were kids, what our parents did is have an effect on what we're doing now. It's the same thing. How do you avoid that? You can't avoid it. The money's already been spent. It was spent, brother. You spent it years ago. So, I mean, in terms of, like, for example, Muslims don't want to do student loans and whatnot. What can they do? Oh, what would be a solution? What would be a better solution? What always happened in history? You had apprentices. Someone who came in and basically worked like a slave, basically did all the grunt work. But in that grunt work, he learnt the skill, he learnt the craft.
Yeah.
So he paid for his education in actual labor. Because there was a price to it. Okay. And in that labor, you could judge or decide, is this work worth what I'm going to get out of it? You can decide. But it was paid for. So rather than paying someone else to do this grunt work, I'm paying him to do the grunt work, for example. By the way, I don't want to belittle the work, say grunt work like it's bad. I'm just saying the easy work or the menial work so you can learn the craft. That would be, if I were to suggest anything to the government, that would be what I think the government should move in that direction. Scrap the whole student loan idea and introduce apprenticeship idea. As in, introduce the idea that if you want to go into a certain field, start working in that field. Get those people, those companies, it would be architects, it would be computer programmers, get them to actually pay for your tuition. So you go to university, and these companies would pay for your tuition on the 1 or 2 days you might go and study, and the other 3 days you work for them. So they have a paid employee that they get, so they get in their value.
I see.
They get in their value. And the beauty of that is that when you finish your studies, not only have you got a qualification debt-free, so you don't have to do that, but also you have experience, which is way more than just studying book. And everyone knows this. Apprentices are a lot more sought after than just those who did a degree, because they know the market, they know the industry. Same thing in medicine. Medicine would be a good, I don't know how you would do it, I'm not a doctor, but I'm saying if there was an avenue or a system that could be made whereby to become a doctor, you go through the grunt work, you go through the hard work of doing it. Maybe even, listen carefully, this is an interesting one, maybe as in to connect what you do with reality. It could even be something like even have a role in learning about the books, ordering medicines, knowing the prices of things, appreciating the workings of a hospital. So that you can know what it takes when you're making decisions to give this medicine to someone who doesn't really need the medicine. Like you just give an antibiotic to someone who got a cold. You know that it costs money, you know how much it costs. And you have to budget that yourself. So you get experience. So my point is that the system is broken as a whole. The thing is, what people are doing, they're trying to patch. It's like a boat that's sinking, and you're just trying to get the duct tape to try and patch these holes. But every time you patch a hole, another hole appears. You're just trying to fix this. You need to get off that boat and go to another boat and try something different. But like I said, that's easy to say. It's free for me to say that. It doesn't. That's the thing. Back to economics. It's free for me to make a suggestion. It doesn't cost me anything. Those who make the decisions, they have the actual task of actually making the decision and dealing with the cost. And on that one little last point, that I don't want to keep ranting on, and that's another reason why socialized systems like the NHS don't tend to work. I don't say it won't work. I don't say it can't work, but don't tend to work. And that's because those who are making the decisions don't bear the brunt and the cost of those decisions.
Okay.
As in their income isn't dependent upon it working or not. I can make a suggestion and implement policies and systems and still get paid the same at the end of the year. It doesn't affect my income. As opposed to if I have a business, if I run a hospital myself and it's a private run business, the decisions I make cost me. So I make better decisions. Or I think deeper about the decisions. I consult other people because I deal with the consequences. Likewise, doctors. If doctors had a role or it was connected to their decisions they make, they'll make different decisions. So even the process of decision making is affected by the system. And imagine your whole life you behave using that system and you never had to make a decision about anything. That means everything you suggest in your life, every idea you have is devoid of reality even. So when you have an idea, we're gonna strike, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Okay, you can do that, but realistically, what skin do you have in the game? As I said, you have no skin in the game. All these strikes and all this stuff you want to do, it has zero consequence to you beyond the fact that you want to get a pay rise. You know what I'm saying? I'm not putting anyone down, by the way. I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying that decision making, even that needs to be addressed. But that's not unique to NHS. That's just everything. It's just everything. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
I think it requires insight anyway. Like there's this whole discussion we're having. A lot of people I know, even myself, generally, we don't know how money works. We don't know the current economic system. We don't know how everything runs. So to make those decisions, to think about stuff like that, it requires insight into this. I'm just conscious of time, so I just think it's a good idea to sort of wrap up here. It's a nice way of ending the initial podcast. Inshallah, we're going to definitely get you on again, Ustad. Thank you very much for coming along. Just before we sort of finish off, I just wanted you to maybe there's probably someone who's going to be listening to this at home, could be a doctor, might not be a doctor, any individual who's currently stressed right now because of everything we've discussed, and he's probably worried for the future, worried for their sort of families, worried for the kids to come. What is one parting advice that they could take away in summary from what we've discussed so far, that they could a parting advice that you'd give and something that they could sort of implement? It could be a one-liner, it could
so trying to keep brief, because I don't do things brief, but I'll try to be brief, is to try not to play the game. As in, the reality is, this whole system works by everyone playing by the rules. But as we've seen, these rules are the same rules that are burning us. And then, again, it's not unique to the medical field, it's everywhere, across the board. So we need to find ways to exit that system. Don't mean exit the medical profession, but in terms of our finances, in terms of how we run our lives, we need to stop playing their game and playing by their rules. And the main way to stop playing those rules is to stop believing, promoting, and abiding by the rules of debt. Start living an asset-based life as opposed to a debt-based life. I'm sure most people, doctors do that anyway. But my point is, rather than buy that car on hire purchase, save up for a car. I mean, just one last point. I remember I looked at a Tesla Model X, the one with the wing doors and that.
Yeah.
And I looked online. Obviously, I like Teslas. I thought, wow, I wonder how much that thing is fully whacked out, for fully spec. I put highest thing on all of it, yeah? And I looked at the price. It had £500 a month. And I thought to myself, you know what? I could actually do that, you know? I mean, I thought to myself, I've always just like fantasized about having a Tesla, but when I looked at the actual monthly payment, I thought to myself, you know what? I could, if I looked at how much I get and how much I spend and how much I have at the end of the month, I could actually pull it off.
Dogecoin.
But then I thought to myself, wait. I took a step back. I thought, wait, how much is it if I paid for it outright?
Yeah.
I'll flick the switch, £120,000. And I thought to myself, what? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When I looked at the monthly payment, my mind was a different mindset.
Yeah.
When I looked at the outright payment, it was a completely different mindset. And this is how we start changing our mindset. Stop looking at the monthly payments. I start looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, 100%.
Look at the bigger picture. Live within your means. Save up for things. Guaranteed, if you have to pay for something outright, your decision making will be completely different. Guaranteed, any doctor who saves up for a house and has the money for a house, the first thing you're going to say, you know what, I want to retire instead. I want to go to Turkey, I want to go to Malaysia, spend half the money on a house and retire. I'm not encouraging doctors to retire. I'm just saying that your decision making will be completely different. So that's my parting advice. I mean, that's the most significant thing. Stop playing this game, which is a failing game, which is the Ponzi game, and it's not the way everyone should live. And it's why we are in where we are. Essentially, by playing that game, you are indirectly harming everyone else. Even if it's a small fraction, we are. That's the reality.
Very interesting. Thank you so much.
And buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, the second podcast will touch on this. Book.
Thank you so much for all of your input today
Jazakallah
and
khair.
for explaining all of these principles to us.
Inshallah.
Make sure that everyone subscribes. Crypto Hash Review. We'll put the link in the description and on the screen. Crypto Hash Review on Instagram as well. There's a lot of beneficial content over there. www.strivemed.co.uk for anyone who wants help with their tutoring or help to get into medicine. Find us on TikTok, StriveMed, Instagram, StriveMed, and make sure to subscribe as well. We're working very hard, guys, honestly, with full-time employment in the hospitals. We barely have any days off, any time off. So we're really trying our best to bring the best content for you. Make sure you subscribe and let us know what you want to see next. All the best. Take care. That's a wrap.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.